evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be talking about a subject that's near and dear to all of us, health. Our guest tonight is Bob Ligon, a licensed acupuncturist and a practitioner of life, spirit, and health counseling. So Bob, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here, Kevin.
So as you can see from my introduction, that's quite a mouthful.
Yes, that's a lot of words.
Yeah, so as a life, spirit, and health counselor, briefly, what does that mean? What do you do?
Well, it means sort of looking beyond the physical symptom for a cause and a way to treat that physical symptom. Could be an emotional disharmony. Chinese medicine is predicated on the movement of qi, or life force, through meridians, pathways through the body, and physical symptoms are thought to be some disruption of that smooth flow of energy around the body.
So people, just to set the stage, so someone would come to you for counseling and acupuncture. I mean, you are also will treat them with acupuncture.
Yes.
They would come to you with, as they would to a doctor, for example. They'd say, you know, I've got this nagging back pain, or I've got, you know, my neck has been stiff for 10 years. And they will come and talk to you about initially trying to solve a physical problem, right?
Correct, yes. And I certainly do treat the symptom. You know, there is a way to treat what's called the branch, but then there's also the root that's also part of that symptom. And the root is usually some deeper level of energy pattern disharmony that is beyond the reach of the person's consciousness.
So what is an energy pattern disharmony? What is that? What does that mean?
Well, in Chinese medicine, health is thought to be the smooth flow of qi, or life energy, around the body in kind of a predictable pattern. And whenever there's either too much flowing or not enough flowing, that's what a disharmony would be called. And that disharmony eventually will affect or compromise the function of some tissue or organ and eventually manifest as a physical symptom.
So if I were to come to you and say, I have lower back pain, which is common, right? Lots of people have
Lots.
lower
Every man over 40 has
right.
low back pain.
And so I would come to you and say, you know, gee, it's nagging and it's getting worse rather than better over time. And what can I do? I already do stretching. I already do all this stuff. And, you know, where would you start?
Well, low back pain, in Chinese medicine, there are correspondences to organ function. And there's the physiological function, but there's also sort of the emotional, energetic, even spiritual function. And kidneys, physiologically in Chinese medicine, rule the low back and the knees. And the emotion most associated with kidneys is fear. So if someone comes to me and they've got low back pain, you know, we'll talk about this, that, and another. But at some point, I'm looking for, you know, what area of their life, you know, is surrounded by fear. You know, it could be some change or some decision that they regret, or some omission that, or some way they were treated as a child that made them unable to speak up about something, and so they remain fearful, and fear constrains the flow of qi, and eventually will manifest in something physical like low back pain.
That sounds very much like a psychologist. I mean, that what you're describing to my mind would be something I would go to see a psychological counselor about, saying, well, I've got this long-standing problem that, whatever, from my childhood or recent adult, whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
well, something like Chinese medicine and sort of these ancient systems like Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, you know, they were sort of the original holistic health. You know, in Chinese medicine, there's not really a differentiation between physical, emotional, and spiritual. It's more thought of as like a spectrum. And each of those areas can affect the others, you know, profoundly. And when you're investigating someone's individual case, you may find the cause, you know, in the physical realm, but it might also be in their emotional experience or in their spiritual belief system. So a lot of the work that I do is kind of like detective work, of looking for the clues and looking for kind of what points to a more, what I call, upriver, you know, cause. You know, the further upriver you go, the more downriver symptoms will correct without direct attention.
I like that analogy. Right.
Yeah.
If you can change the direction of the river way upstream,
Yeah.
you don't get flooding downstream.
Another way of thinking of it is getting kind of to the essence of the matter from the manifestation. The manifestation is really the guide or the piece of information that gets our attention. Pain and discomfort and dysfunction is undeniable. And our culture largely seeks to suppress that with medications, over-the-counter treatments and so forth, just to eliminate the symptom and then carry on with our life really unaltered in the way we live. The more holistic view is to investigate all those areas and find where the choices are creating that disharmony and modify those choices so that the disharmony becomes harmonious and relieves the symptom, not only relieves the symptom, but cures it.
It makes me think of a particular advertising for antacids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see them on TV all
Watch
the time.
the evening news. You'll see all the common maladies of the nation.
Yes, you will.
Hemorrhoids, indigestion, headaches.
But I'm struck because of the things you're talking about now, where you're covering up the symptoms, and I think about all these antacid commercials, and there's Zantac and
Yes.
Nexium.
The
And,
graphics of going after those little acid bits in your stomach.
right, or the
plugging
one,
up the holes.
The one I saw the other day is the little firefighters down in your stomach, with fire extinguishers, putting out the flames.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, doesn't that feel like relief?
Yes, I'm putting out the flames with this toxic substance that, right.
Yeah.
And so it brings to mind, well, is that helping to cure the problem, or is it just masking it?
Yeah. Well, in my worldview, it's largely masking it. It's trying to just alter in a remedial fashion at the moment of manifestation, hoping that that will be the cure. But what's creating that overacid condition, is much deeper in the energetic patterns of that person. It could be a physical thing. They may have some kind of hormonal imbalance, but particularly with stomach issues, there's usually a very strong emotional component, where there's anxiety and worry and, what we'd say in Chinese medicine is like overthinking. Even someone who studies a lot can create that kind of condition because it will stress the stomach, sort of spleen and pancreas. And the antacids are just sort of like the fire extinguisher. They're putting out the fire at the very end, but they're not really addressing how the fire got started or
Right.
what agent initiated the fire.
It's like there's an electrical fire in your house, and you put out the fire, but you don't change the wiring.
Right. You go back with the same wiring and you're going to cause another fire. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So again, thinking about stomach issues, though, I would think there's a strong correlation to diet and what you're eating.
Very much so.
And you have a background in
Yes.
studying food and what we take into ourselves. Right?
Well, like I would say to most of my patients, a healthy, balanced, customized and fine-tuned diet for an individual is a necessary condition for recovering health, but it's not sufficient. That is, in Chinese medicine, one of the first phases of treatment, at least the way I approach it, is try to stabilize the physiology. That is, if there is stomach pain, we try to alleviate the stomach pain, and one of the ways that can be done is to make some dietary suggestions. And chiefly for most people, it really means removing the most offending foods. Refined processed foods, sugar, white flour products, poor quality oils. Caffeine in excess. That takes so much stress off the physiology that the natural tendencies towards equilibrium, which is really the impetus of life force. Life force is always seeking to create life, and equilibrium is what is conducive to supporting life. So removing those stressors, gives that natural tendency a chance to assert itself. And once that physiology is stabilized, then we have, we've quieted that chaos of the physical discomfort, that we can start to delve into some of the deeper energetic, emotional, spiritual issues that are really the cause of the symptoms that they're having.
And that delving, you mentioned before the show something I thought was very interesting, that when someone comes to see you, the typical appointment time is 2 hours.
Yes.
Which by Western standards would seem exceptionally long.
Yes, and every patient to a person is amazed how fast that time goes. Once you quiet down the sort of complexity, chaos, confusion that most people, live in, modern life is just full of stressors and pressures, and they are so prominent that it's very difficult for someone to access what I would call their creative intelligence, to gain.
There's too much distraction. They're too focused on other things to focus on that. Is that
yeah,
what's going on?
they can't look at something and see it as it truly is. There's so much interference, so many pressures, so many interpretations, so much training, socialization, that to penetrate to what is their personal truth requires a lot of effort. And quieting down all that noise, or as one of my yoga teachers used to say, the rucka of life, so that in that stillness you start to see, what is the truth of my life or of my existence. And from there, then you can begin to gain the insights of where something's not working. Then you'll more easily recognize to yourself that, that's just not right. I don't know why, but, let's talk about it.
So your practice, it's interesting. It comes across as being as much a counseling dialogue exercise as it is actual physical attention, like the acupuncture or other aspects of Chinese medicine play a part, but they're...
Yeah, it's a mixture of, of talk therapy and acupuncture or Chinese medicine modalities. Excuse me. And a typical session, I spend the first 30 or 40 minutes just talking, and much of that is devoted to kind of creating some separation between, the outside world where all this kind of swirling chaos, impinges on someone, to the kind of stillness and the quietness of the treatment setting. So after 30 or 40 minutes, then I put them on the table and put some acupuncture needles in, and then, the acupuncture kind of takes over. And my feeling of what acupuncture really does is that it takes this, release of the chaos and accentuates it more to this kind of place of stillness where the natural tendency of the life force of the qi can begin to be experienced so that it becomes informative. You start to think differently, you perceive differently, and you're more receptive to new ideas, to new patterns of how you experience life. Because most people, they're so busy, they rely on the imprinted patterns. And the imprinted patterns, for most of us, occurred before we really knew which end was up. And
Get up, eat breakfast, go to work.
yeah, or until the age of, critical thinking. Until we're teenagers, we're just little sponges. We soak up everything that's in our environment. It's not only until later, adolescence is sort of the beginning when we start to question things of, what do I really want to retain and what's not useful to me. But for most people, that's an incomplete process. They get to be 50, 60, 70 years old. They still haven't completed that transition from adolescence to adulthood. If adulthood can be
Are they shocked or unhappy if you point that out to them? You're still a kid at heart. You never grew up.
Yeah, they are surprised and skeptical, but when they begin to experience the enlivening of the energy of their lives, then they're persuaded that there's something to it. They're getting in touch with that energy that they sort of shelved back in their 20s. We all came through college, we're going to change the world, we're full of idealism, and then we all got jobs, and mortgages, and
families.
And had to had to devote our attention to those very real practical concerns. But by midlife, and many of my patients are midlife, those concerns have diminished in their demands. So once again, our attention can return to sort of these bigger questions of life of who I am and what am I going to do, and so once people begin to discover that, they sort of are almost reborn. They come alive again. They revive ideas, activities, pursuits that they had dismissed as impractical or impossible, and return to them with a kind of a renewed or a fresh outlook that, hey, yes, maybe I can do that, and it's making my shoulder pain feel better, or my shoulder pain is getting better at the same time. Is there a connection? And as I spend more time with someone and talk with them more, they start to see a relationship between these attitudes that they've held, and they begin to examine, begin to change, and the clearing up of some of their physiological symptoms.
So, and don't this will sound terrible, but I'll try to ask it in as non-threatening way as I can.
Oh, threaten away.
It
I'm
sounds, I can kind of picture this as being a condition of the affluent. Because if you're 55 and you're still struggling to pay the rent, as many people in America are, do you have time for all this? I mean, you still got all those stresses. I've got a job, I may or may not like it. I'm worried about retiring. Will I have enough income? I can't make the rent as it is. I got a car payment that's over my head. I mean, these are very real problems for most Americans and well into middle age and beyond. So is the kind of thing you're talking about, is it applicable in cases like that, or do you have to have achieved a certain level of wealth?
No, I mean, like I said, most of my patient population are midlife folks, but not all. And you know, another sort of patient scenario, even if they're not, you know, so-called affluent, you know, they have a lot of times, you know, I don't see someone until they've seen every specialist between, you know, Buffalo and Toledo, and still aren't getting results, and they've already spent, you know, thousands of dollars, you know, trying to find a solution, and they're struggling still to, you know, make the mortgage payment. But one of the things I'm fond of saying to myself is that, you know, value is never expensive.
That's a great phrase.
And, you know, if you can deliver value for an expenditure, you know, it seems like a bargain, especially if it results in the restoration or the activation of latent potential that enables you to, you know, live a fuller life, maybe, you know, change jobs, you know, work harder and make more money. It's like sticker shock at first, but the payoff is huge.
So do you have cases where you're not able to help your client get
It depends on the motivation of the patient. You know, if they're motivated, interested, and perseverant, yeah, it's virtually 100% success rate.
That's astonishing. Over how long a period of time, typically, or is there a typical case?
You know, it varies, of course. But usually within 18 months, you know, someone has, you know, kind of gotten most of what I can do for them. After that, you know, we may continue to develop, but typically I'll see someone every other week for maybe 6 months. And then as they begin to kind of get with, you know, their personal program, we stretch out the interval. Then some people, I guess, maybe the real objective, some people never come back. They're just off on their own, doing
they've
it.
graduated.
Yeah. Some people, you know, come once a month or once every 2 months just for a tune-up or a visit, I suppose. And but the point really I was trying to make is that the kinds of changes that are possible, you know, with this kind of treatment and investigation, the value is just incalculable, because it's not just in getting rid of a physical symptom or maybe transferring to a better job, but its real ultimate payoff is, you know, kind of a fulfillment with the life experience. And that to me is like the highest achievement of life, is to have that fulfilling feeling, you know, where someone is whole. You know, you don't have regret, you don't have remorse, you don't have unrequited desires. You know, you have investigated all of those things, pursued them to your satisfaction, and, you know, you're at peace.
Now, you mentioned before the show that you yourself find yourself now as we share an age, as we head into our 6th decade,
Indeed.
that you find yourself in a position where you're really as happy as you've ever been, right?
Yes, what I, you know, try to explain to my patients is that if you can stabilize your physiological health, you know, investigate some of these other energetic issues, you can, you know, restore physical health, you can maintain, you know, mental clarity, you can have, you know, spiritual peace, and that will follow you right up to your last breath. So even as, you know, you physically decline, and we all do, you know, it's just the DNA is going to, you know, expire at some point. Right? But you can have this continually ascending, fulfilling experience of life that continues right up until, you know, you pass over, or you decide to pass over.
Instead of pass away, pass over, meaning?
To the other side, or return to the energetic realm, the purely energetic realm.
Is that a concept in Chinese medicine, that our energy returns back into some other realm?
Yes, well, the character for human being is in Chinese, and I think I'm remembering this correct, is that it's the mediator between heaven and earth. And the passage of qi is thought to follow that path. It ascends from heaven, passes through our body into the earth, back through the body and back to heaven. So we as humans, we're mediating between the energy of heaven, which is sort of an insubstantial energy. It's like starlight.
Right? Oh, okay, starlight.
As opposed to the earth energy, which is very tangible, practical, hard. And when we're in this life, we're largely in the physical realm. We aspire to some connection or understanding of the energetic realm, which to me is what gives rise to religion and philosophy. Those are attempts to bridge that space between the physical world and the sort of the non-physical world. And Chinese medicine, in its kind of holistic approach, seeks to find ways to harmonize that movement, of which death is the return to the energetic realm.
So it is this passing over back into this other realm,
yes,
rather than passing away.
We, as is it the Joni Mitchell song? We're billion-year-old stardust. We come from energy, we materialize into physical form, and then we return to energy. Dust to dust, sort of thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, you used the word mindfulness, and I want to come back to that because that's an interesting concept. What when we think about being mindful, well, be mindful of the stairs, mind the gap.
Yes.
Right. So, but my belief is that your use of that word is something else. Mindfulness means something more.
Well, mindfulness, one of the aspects of it is being fully present. We are here right now, and because we're talking and we're doing this show, we're focused right here. But in a normal conversation, we'd be talking, but we'd have thoughts going this way and that way, and and mindfulness to me is a clarity of focus, a clarity of intention that enables you to discern what is true, what is real, what's appropriate for you, and what is illusion or distraction or digression or diversion. All of those, that last little set of adjectives, I think, lead to depletion, whereas the clarity and the focus on what's true, and I'd like to think of that as what's personally true for you, I think generally guide us to that life force, or some would say communion with the divine, that which animates us, animates the life force. So mindfulness is a way of describing how to kind of train oneself in a discipline to stay in touch with that life force. And it eventually begins to inform how we make decisions. My belief is that we live in a binary world, of which computer technology is the best example. Most sophisticated computers at the most elemental level, it's whether that
yes or no.
Yes or no. It's either a plus or a zero. That's the binary metaphor. And in the relative world that is binary, antagonistic, I think every proposition can be distilled down to a choice of A or B, a binary choice at its essence. And at that moment, when you can get it down to those two choices, as you develop mindfulness or powers of discernment, one of those choices will have a preponderance of life force, and one will have a preponderance of constraint or depletion.
And so if you've spent time developing this mindfulness where you're trying to think of yourself in terms of being in touch with this spiritual energy or the life energy, that it will be much easier to discern which of those choices leads you in that path.
Yes, and as you accumulate more and more choices of the life force, you are kind of gathering more life force, and that manifests as physical health, as mental clarity, as spiritual inspiration. I used to at one time try to delve into the so-called kind of negative content and trauma of people's lives, and I don't do that so much anymore. I'd really just try to guide them to making decisions that consistently emphasize the life-giving choice of A and B. And eventually, all of that so-called negativity just, kind of falls off the table. It's crowded out by the majority of the life force energy.
So give me an example. I mean, without, of course, naming names, but someone who has come to you and has been in this state of chaos that you talked about earlier, and has been able to work through into a state of mindfulness.
Yeah. A common example, and this is more of a composite rather than a particular case, and I've noticed it more in women, but maybe that's because most of my patients are women. But a lot of women are trained or learned or somehow get into a pattern of not speaking up. They won't speak the truth that they feel. To accommodate, an authority figure, a father, husband, brother, teacher, boss, they will push down their true feelings and say what they think is expected of them. Now, that is a very real form of constraint, to...
And stifling the life energy. I would think.
Yes, right. It's literally, kind of choking it off. That's making that depletion choice. I mean, they don't do it, they do it without mindfulness. They don't know that they're doing it. They're doing it to survive, as far as they know.
Or they've just been programmed to think that way.
They've been programmed to think that way. So they come in and they've got some chronic condition, like stomach problems or migraine headaches, which is very common among females. And after a little bit of discussion, we discovered that they have been afraid to speak up. And with some encouragement, some kind of reprogramming, we do sort of go back and find, well, where did that begin, or where did you first begin to feel like that? And much of this, and maybe this is sort of like cognitive therapy, where we go back and we kind of dissect that moment and bring it into adult consciousness for reprogramming.
Now, that would seem to have some dangers associated with it as well, especially if that constraint is coming from a relationship like a marriage. And then if your patient sees that, oh, well, this is restraining me, the relationship has to change.
Well, indeed, some of the cures are making changes in some of the major areas of life. And sometimes that is, reassessing a primary relationship.
Be it a spouse or a job or whatever.
Yeah, or even with parents. Sometimes parents who have already departed, they just have not been able to get past, the patterns that were part of that relationship. It can mean changing jobs. It can mean retiring. It can mean changing location. One of the questions that I ask someone when they first contact me is, are you willing to bring up every area of your life for re-examination and possible change? And most people will say, oh, yes, I am, because they pretty much, that's what they're expected to say or what they think I want them to say. But once we walk into those areas, right away I can tell if they're really serious or if they're not ready yet.
Well, believe it or not, Bob, we're already out of time.
Yes, time does fly.
It does fly. It does indeed. So I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been enlightening for me, certainly, and hopefully for our audience as well. And we'll have you back as well. Even though you're not local in Chicago, we will find a way to get you back here.
We'll continue at another time.
We will. All right.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you. And thank you for, once again, watching Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. We've been visiting with Bob Ligon tonight. So you can see us every Saturday night at 8 o'clock on Comcast Channel 19. And you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So till next time, thank you and good night.